Welcome to the last edition of the Outer Realm for 2020. We are broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans. Don't forget to stop by on YouTube under the station account and join us there in chat. I will do my best to keep up with you. And you want to communicate with the guests, or if you have any questions, that will be the way to do it. So, with that being said, tonight's episode is near and dear to me, and I've been looking forward to this. We will be bringing on Dr. Kathleen Ann Ball, who is a researcher, traveler, and explorer of ancient sites. The Brazilian Templar Mystery is a story of Dr. Kathleen Ball's discovery of a cave hidden in a remote area on the outskirts of a small Brazilian town. A cave carved by the Knights Templar. And Kathleen has done extensive research into the history of the Templars, backtracked their trail through Portugal, France, Scotland, and England in search of the true purpose of the order and what it means today. Her ongoing research trips will include Malta, return to Portugal, the UK, France, Spain, Italy, Jerusalem, Ethiopia. I want to go with Kathleen. I'm kind of digging Kathleen's job right now. But, this predates Christopher Columbus by 200 years. Wow, I think history is about to get rewritten, if you ask me, for what it's worth. But we do know, that the Templars did come into North America roughly 1314. There are reports of them being around 1362. Prince Henry Sinclair, also Templar, was said to be here around 1398. We know that they made the trek across the ocean to northern Canada, coming in through Greenland and working their way down. There have been, little tidbits of stones and writings found all the way down through the east coast of Canada and the United States, which is pretty fascinating. There have even been little tidbits of information found right into bloody Michigan, Lake Superior. So they really they had a way. They made it here, and they're definitely proof of them here. But nobody has found proof of them in Brazil or South America, especially predating Columbus. But some believe that Columbus himself was here on a retrieval mission. So I don't know. Was he here on a retrieval mission? It was a pretty barbaric experience, but what people don't know is he was actually here roughly 4 times, not just one time. Did he discover, the whole new world? No, of course not. That would be silly to think that, but a lot of people do believe it. At the end of the day, however, let's face it, the guy showed up with 3 ships with red crosses. His father-in-law was a Grand Master, Templar Grand Master, the Knights of Christ, who also happened to own a fleet of ships. So you have to start, adding things up and really looking at things from a different perspective, not just going based on the history that we know today. So if that is a thing, I think that Dr. Kathleen Ann Ball will have definitely touched on something that will indeed rewrite history. Without a doubt, she will have basically rewritten history. So we're just waiting for Joe to bring her on. I'm really excited about this. Oh, Zach man, hi, how are you? Happy to see you in here. I did have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you. Nice, quiet. We are under lockdown here, so we had to keep it quiet, but it was a lot of fun. Hope you had a good Christmas as well. I love your snazzy shirt. Your lady has really good taste. And I appreciate you joining us tonight. So hopefully we'll have a few more people coming in. I know we have a lot of listeners coming in. And there's the lady herself. How are you?
Great. How are you, Michelle?
I am doing well. Been really looking forward to this, touching a little bit on, the Templar North America connection, Chris Columbus, his connection. I always laugh because, I say to people, the man showed up with ships with red crosses.
Right.
For me, it's just, I don't know, a bit of a no-brainer, but it doesn't really kick in with everybody. So, mind you, a lot of people who are followers don't really know the difference between even a Templar and a Crusader. So
Right.
they mix the two up together, and some were just everyday people who are just trying to, maybe clear a jail sentence, or anybody could join, compared to the Templar who were so prestigious. And a lot of morals, morality, a lot of deep thinkers. When you think about it, people say, well, they were looking for treasure. No, rich men don't give up everything to go looking for treasure unless it's really, as Freddie Silva says, worth dying for.
Exactly. Exactly. Because they were in one of the most dangerous areas in the world at the time. There was
Yes.
so much going on, there was so
Hmm.
much going on in the Holy Land at the time.
Hmm.
And the people who lived there, the people who had already established themselves there, they were not eager to let someone come in and just take over. There was automatically, you're going to have a backlash. So,
Hmm.
put themselves, and initially, there was only 9 nights. So the whole story about them going there to protect the pilgrims really doesn't hold water,
No.
really makes sense. And the fact that they made a beeline, I mean, they went right directly to the stables above the Temple Mount. And there's archaeological evidence that they were definitely in the tunnels. There's things, Templar relics that are found that have been found in the tunnels. So this is the first place they go, right? And they make that their headquarters. And then all of a sudden, they come back to Europe and they've got all this money, they've got all these boat building skills, they've got, I mean, it just doesn't fly. I mean, they had to do something. And, with my research, I happened to stumble on some books in the Rosicrucian Library, a couple of years ago, that indicate that there was also an order of knights in 586 BC that was created by Nebuchadnezzar to protect the people who were building the temple.
Hmm.
If I'm correct in this, and I'm going to continue with this line of research, I think that many of those families were the same families that came forward in 1090 and eventually became what is known as the Templars, the Knights Templars, in 1118. I'm thinking
Wow.
it's probably the same genealogies were involved in this, and I think that's why. Because back then, all the records they had physical records, yes, but most of the information was passed down orally from family member to family member, generationally. It was passed down. So I think that those 9 Templars were from families that this information had come forward generation after generation, and they knew exactly what they were looking for.
Hmm.
Over there.
And your theory on what they were looking for, because people will theorize, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, the list goes on, right? What do you think it was?
Well, okay, so I think that they came back with the Phoenician maps. I think they came back with genealogy records. I think they came back with relics as well. And I'll get to that later because
Yes.
there's a connection with Ethiopia that many people don't know, that the Templars in Portugal specifically entertained the king of Ethiopia numerous times between 1100 and 1320 when they were disbanded. And the Templars also traveled into Ethiopia. Why? All right. That's a
Yeah.
big. So this is one of the places on my agenda, that my future agenda, once COVID.
Oh, COVID. Yes.
But so that leads me to believe that when they came back into France and Spain and Italy and Portugal, they had possession of the genealogies, the relics. They had possession of the Phoenician maps. The Phoenicians were known to travel the seas, so they had really specific maps. And you have to also consider that at the time, the Portuguese were the only people who had fleets. The Templars were the owners of the fleets of ships. They were the only ones that were seaworthy ships, the
Mhm.
only people that owned ships. So fast forward to 1307, when the King of France, of course, decides that he doesn't want to pay his debt back to the Templars, right?
Mhm.
So he concocts this whole propaganda scheme to basically take their lands after he'd already taken the Jews. Okay, so what's going on in 1307, right? What's going on?
Mhm.
Putting this out to all of the other kingdoms and all the other, monarchies to say, we want to shut down the Templars. We want to shut them down. We want to take what they have. And many of, Scotland didn't agree that. England didn't right away, but many of the other monarchs did, and they were putting pressure on the king in Portugal, who didn't. He died in 1325, and
Mhm.
so had a very young son. So Portugal was very vulnerable.
Mhm.
So time that I think that they went into Brazil when this cave was dug that had the Templar cross that I discovered, I think it was during that time. I think that it was in the early 1300s. They had the money, they had the means,
Mhm.
certainly had the motivation,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
created Portugal as a sovereign nation that was protected from the church. Portugal, Port of the Grail, right?
Portugal. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Port of the Grail, Portugal was created by the Templars for King Alfonso I, who I also suspect may be of the bloodline of Jesus and Mary, very possibly. I don't know that for a fact, but that's something that I'm moving in that direction with my research, because one of the things that the Templars, one of their agendas was to create a sovereign nation and eventually a sovereign world of equality, of acceptance. So,
Mhm.
that all people would be, they were equal. They saw all people as equal. I mean, after all, they'd been over in the Holy Land and they'd seen Saracens and Sufis and Jews and everyone living together harmoniously. They
Mhm.
saw that. The Phoenicians did that. The Phoenicians, that must have been passed down in some of the things that they read about with the Phoenicians as well. So Portugal was created as a sovereign nation. This is where something that Freddie, Sylvia, and I really agree on, because
Yes.
the more I've been to Portugal twice, and Portugal was dominated by the Templars. It was absolutely a Templar nation. There is no
Mhm.
doubt about it in my mind. There are more Templar castles there than anywhere else in Europe, and they're
That's
amazing.
fascinating. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you on that. I think that that is the heart of everything. And going into the Temple Mount, you know, to look for the obvious, I mean, I think the Babylonians would have found all that long before I think the Templars would have found it personally. Um, but your point of view with everything, when you figured they went over before 1314, like in and around the 1307 mark,
Well, 1307 was when
when they were,
they were gathered up and murdered. In
yes.
1090 is when these members that became Templars later in 1118, right?
Mm-hmm.
And later, then in 1129 is when they were canonized, when the Pope finally said, gave his stamp and said, okay, you are Templars. But in 1090 is when these men originally came together. I mean, nothing happens overnight. You don't just decide to have a club. You
Mm-hmm.
don't just all of a sudden say, well, I'm going to have a club and I'm going to get these people together, and all of a sudden it exists. That's not how it works.
No. No.
So this was going on. This was brewing back in 1090 when they were fighting the Moors and they were fighting other people. And so when they came back from Portugal initially into, from the Holy Land, these 9 nights, and of course that expanded rapidly. The Templars
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden overnight became hundreds and then thousands and then hundreds of thousands. But they came into Portugal, they established that country as a sovereign nation, They conquered the Moors, they conquered Islam that was there, and then invited them to stay. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This impresses me. Okay, so then not only that, but they're taking in the Jews, the Cathars, the Gnostics. They're taking in everybody that the church is,
the castaways,
trying to annihilate. They're taking to Portugal. So Portugal is made up, and still to this day is made up of all of these people from all backgrounds. Well, guess what? Alto Paraíso in Brazil is exactly the same way.
Wow, really? Isn't that fascinating?
Isn't that interesting?
Just a little bit. Yes.
Walk down the street in Alto Paraíso, and you will talk to someone from Germany, and this has happened to me. I walked down the street, I was speaking to someone from Germany, and the next thing I know, I've met a fellow from Japan and a woman from Portugal, and then there's this gal that's there teaching acro yoga who is from India. And I mean, literally, the next thing I know, I'm at a restaurant and I'm having a meal with people from 10 different countries. And this happens every day. This is an everyday occurrence. And the beauty of it is that these people, when they come into Alto Paraíso, there's a triangular area. There's Moinho, Alto Paraíso, and St. George. St. George means St. George.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, it's just kind of like, one of these things just aren't like the others. You feel like you're having one of these things, like, how is this St. George? And
right?
Yes.
And Alto Paraíso means paradise. It means paradise. So my premise and my belief is that the Templars came into Alto Paraíso intentionally. They already knew where they were coming. They had the Phoenician maps, right? They came into the coast of Brazil, and people say, well, how did they get into Alto Paraíso? Well, they got into Alto Paraíso because they came in with the Amazonian tribes that come into Alto Paraíso every single year and have for thousands of years. And I actually attended one of their ceremonies. I was invited to attend, and I participated in their ceremonies there. So they were brought into Alto Paraíso from those Amazonian tribes that still to this day come to Alto Paraíso. And if you go there, what you find is it's literally a paradise. It's aptly named because there's pineapple trees and mangoes. I mean, you could have a plot of land that's, say, 1 hectare, which is about 2.5 acres, and you have mango, papaya, avocados that are the size of footballs. These are naturally growing in that area. It's beautiful places in South America, and it is also the only place in South America that has that many people living harmoniously in this triangular area.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, I mean, what would have tempted or prompted the Amazonians to just bring these strangers into this? It almost sounds like it would be a bit of a sacred place. It's paradise, like you say. Out of you have this whole fleet of ships coming in.
Right.
Would you, not knowing, usually back away, or what would prompt them to bring them in?
I don't know, but I think it had something to do with their spiritual practices, And it's like, I know from my personal experience, I was mentioning earlier to you, that I was invited by the Kalunga for an interview.
Yes, that's fascinating.
Nobody talks to the Kalunga. The Kalunga avoid people. They sent an invitation through a mutual friend of ours to interview me and agreed to an interview. They have some information about the Templars for me that they want to tell me about. Okay, so I think that's the same thing. It's an energetic thing, because we have to consider that ancient people, indigenous people, to this day, they respond to energy. They don't look at your face, and they don't see how pretty or how whatever. They don't look at those things. They look at your energy. They pay attention. They interact with you as a result of your energy. I think that that's what was going on. I think they had an energetic relationship with these Templars. The
Hmm.
Templars had an agenda. They were able to communicate somehow that they were wanting to live, harmoniously and with equality. They obviously didn't feel threatened by them.
Hmm.
Oh,
No.
that's what I'm thinking at this point. And I'll find out, of course, more when I talk to the Kalinga, because the Kalinga, they carry their oral traditions and all their oral information forward for thousands of years.
Hmm.
I'm really fascinated. I'm really curious, and I can't wait to get back to Brazil.
Oh
to,
my
to
gosh.
you know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really can't wait. So I have a metal detector waiting for me over there, and I have the Kalinga interview. And I have locals that the locals tell me they come and tell me, oh, you need to talk to so and so. This
Hmm.
going to the one huge piece of property that was owned by this woman, and her great grandfather was a ship captain. Anyway, when I go to this property to interview this woman, I believe it was actually Templar property.
Wow. So do you think she's
This
a
is
descendant?
well, she wouldn't have been. But I think the ship captain bought it from someone who is a descendant of the Templars. And one of the reasons why is because what did I find there on the property? Is a mill wheel and a bronze axe.
Yeah, it sort of speaks for itself right there, doesn't it?
Oh,
Wow.
right.
Wow. Wow.
So and also it's right below where I found the cave. It's within 5 kilometers just below where I found the cave. So
Wow. Do you think that because I know I'm going to be asked, I'm sort of watching the chat room and I'm just sort of watching my messenger at the same time. So if you see me, it's because I'm kind of solo tonight, less my co-host, and I'm manning everything. Um, do you think they would have brought, all of these alleged relics from the Temple Mount here? Do you
it's a
think that's why nobody has ever found it?
it's a possibility and has crossed my mind. And of course, I talked about that there are some other locations, which I'm not going to get into much tonight because I haven't explored them myself yet. But
Yes.
that is on my agenda.
Hmm.
And I think that it is a very strong possibility. I know that, I did meet a current Mason, a man who's a Mason, whose family were Templars. And
Hmm.
he's a descendant of a Templar who currently lives in Brazil now.
Wow.
So, he built this castle, Camelot Castle, Pousada,
Hmm.
in Valparaíso. There's this castle right smack in the middle of Valparaíso, in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And so he told me there's numerous descendants of Templars there. And when I
Hmm.
found out in the Rosicrucian library during my research, I found out why they sort of went underground and they stayed hidden is because when in the 1400s, when the Spanish came in and everybody came into Portugal, the Jesuits hunted down the Templars' descendants and murdered them.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Funny enough, because well, I mean, we're talking about Chris Columbus, who allegedly, I mean, he basically his father-in-law was, said to be a Grand Master of the Knights of Christ. He owned a fleet of ships.
Right.
They believe he was sent on a retrieval mission. Why can't I speak tonight? I'm completely tongue-tied. A retrieval mission. So
Yeah.
could they have been looking for something that your Templars may have brought over? What
Very
else would they be there to retrieve?
Right, very possibly. There was also when I interviewed this one woman, Leonia, that owned this property over there that I believe is was Templar property. She
Hmm.
told me that there was a great deal of gold in the area, so that is also a draw,
Mm.
and could have
Yes.
been one of the things that that was a draw for the Templars as well. You
Hmm.
know, I had one of my researchers in Portugal tell me that the king of Portugal at the time had agreed to allow the Templars to go to Portugal in exchange for a fifth of the gold. So how did they know there was gold there if he died in 1325? Okay. They
Mm.
had been there before that time, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And they would have had to been there before even that in order to find the gold to begin with.
Well, in South America, for sure. I mean, the only, I think, known, I say, they have to go by some of the evidence,
Right.
because some of it's so sketchy coming in through North America, where they said they would have come in through North America with the Norse, because there's a strong connection between the Norse and many of the Scottish Templars. If you go
Absolutely.
in, right? So they figure, okay, because of this connection that they come in through via Greenland in down through, northern Canada.
Right.
Hence, Oak Island people, yeah, they think it's a thing, but they know that in 1398, Henry Sinclair did
Right.
that because the Mi'kmaq Indian tribe, the indigenous tribe there, their flag
Right.
was the Sinclair flag. It's like, so we know that was a
I
thing.
mean, yes.
1314, we know they came in even before Sinclair in 1398, and they would have come in because they
Yeah.
find evidence of all of this. And then there's, of course, the Kensington expedition of 1362, in and
Right.
around that area, right? So we know that they're there. They have
Right.
found traces of them in Michigan, Lake Superior area, but
Right.
that's coming in from up top. And they were supposed to make their way down, but how far down did they make it?
Exactly. Exactly. There's
You
so
know?
much. There's so much. We have already, in the last 20 years, I've been involved in archaeological digs since 1991.
Wow,
And
fantastic.
yeah, and I've been, mostly in North America. It's
Hmm.
been primarily here in North America. But what I know that in the last 15 to 20 years, we have discovered more archaeological sites, ancient sites in the last 15 to 20 years than we have in 100 years. I mean, there's
Wow.
so much being revealed now. It is
Hmm.
just, and I don't see that as an accident. I see that that's all the earth is giving up its secrets. At the
I,
same time,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I tend to agree with you. There's just too much that is, you can hypothesize all you want, but
right.
honestly, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a freaking duck.
Exactly.
It's got to be a duck. It's just all there. And I don't know why people just fight it. Is it because it's like the good old boy society? This is the way history is. We don't want to veer away from it. We don't want to change it. Like, what do you think this is going to do for you? I mean, you
Right.
come in and you have this amazing finding, which, I'd like you to walk us through that because I'm sure your face is kind of like, what? When you saw that. But what do you think they would do? Do you think that they will actually acknowledge your findings as what they are?
Well, I've expected. I'm already prepared for a huge backlash. I'm already prepared for that. Uh,
Yes.
and this isn't, the way that my life has gone. This is perfectly okay with me.
Hmm.
I'm up to it. Put it that
Right.
way.
Right.
But I've talked to too many historians, and I talked to one of the main historians in
Hmm.
Brazil. Louis Savi, who wrote a book, and I'm having it. I'm having that translated as well.
Hmm.
But he even believes that the Templars were there in the 1300s. There's just too much, and he's got a ton of evidence as well.
Hmm.
Just too much evidence. The Norse were traveling, the Vikings, they were traveling all over the world. We know that.
Hmm.
And my grandfather was a Dane, and his family were Templars.
Hmm.
I know that there was connections. I know that records and maps had to have been exchanged and shared amongst these families. It just makes sense.
Hmm.
So, when we're talking about, common sense, it's just common sense.
Yes.
And on top of that, I found family coat of arms in the castle in Tamar that are in Scotland. Same,
Yes.
same,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes. But I mean, they do hypothesize that many of the Templars, when they were being rounded up, headed for Scotland for immunity, right?
exactly.
So I guess it would make sense that some of them would have remained, which is interesting. But you're also, if you look at the connection between, Chris Columbus with his family ties, that family married into the Sinclair line.
Of course.
So you have that connection in there too. So that I can say, okay, yeah, I could see that connection of the coat of arms from here and here. I could see them because there's so many connections between Portugal and Scotland, because Scotland was very pro Templar. Like, they weren't going to fall for the church. Like, no, we don't care. We're not going to throw them out, throw them to the wolves, and then they blended in.
Right.
But to come into Brazil, to me, is just like, especially 200 years prior
Right.
to Columbus, because, Columbus discovered the New World. And this is what they're sticking with. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, totally blew my mind too. But then, what preceded my discovery there was in 2009, my husband and I were in France, and we had this whole trip planned out in this whole itinerary, and none of it happened.
Right.
We canceled the trip because of what happened in Dome, right? When we were in Dome, and we go into this underground grotto, and I come out, and the curator for the museum says to me, "Would you like to go see where the Templars were housed before they were murdered in 1307?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be great." Of course. So he hands me the keys, walks me over there, and tells me, "Take as long as you like, madam." And so I photographed everything in there. Of course, I photographed everything. Well, if I hadn't gone in there in 2009, I would not have known what a cross that the Templars were carving between 1307 and 1314, when they were actually killed. I wouldn't have known what they looked like.
Right.
So I wouldn't have recognized the one in Brazil, in Altaparizo, because it was the same cross, the same style of cross, with the same style of tool markings. So
wow. Yeah.
It was
There's
like
your connection.
Right. There's my connection. And that's what initially, and I intuitively said, wow, okay, nobody's going to believe this.
No, it's a little, yeah.
I've got to find evidence, I need to find evidence. And so, of course, when I interviewed Leonia, and I found that mill wheel, and I found the bronze axe that had been there. And she said that it had been there all her life, that her great-great-great-grandfather, when he came over, it was there on the property when they bought the property from whoever owned it at that time. So there's a whole lot of indications. There's a lot of local rumors as well. And there's also a mathematician from the University of Brasilia who lives in Moinho, there's little towns. It creates a triangle: Moinho, Altaparizo, and St. George, right? There's towns. So she lives in Moinho. She's a sacred geometrist. She does sacred geometry, and she is investigating, doing research on the Templars having been there in the 1300s. Again, she believes they were there early on, and what she states is that they actually did what she calls magic, that they did ceremony and magic, and she thinks that's what brought all the people in. But that's what remains to be seen. But she's a professor at the University of Brasilia, and she's serious about her work, very, very serious. And that was a complete accident that I happened to run into her. I was going someplace else, and we stopped house, and next thing I know, I'm in this conversation with this woman who teaches sacred geometry, right? And she tells me that there was she has discovered grids that she believes that the Templars created when they were there.
Grids. There's a lot of esoteric stuff that surrounds the Templars, right? And I think some of that was used against them, or some of that was misinterpreted, or of course we know there's a lot of propaganda, to round them up in the first place. But I think a lot of stuff is coming to light with that. And but I think we're also in a day and age where we can appreciate it and have a better understanding of it, because they did work a lot with sacred geometry. Everything was numbers with the
Well,
Masons.
the
Everything's like exact, you know?
churches and the temples that they built,
Yeah. Yes.
sacred geometry was used in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yes. Oh no, it's almost like perfect. When they
Exactly.
build something, the measurements are like perfect,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know. So I think it's fascinating. So you're on a trip in Brazil. How does one just come across a Templar cave? Just, because
Well,
I think I'm doing it all wrong anywhere. It's like, you know,
well,
it's like, come on.
well, it was a complete fluke. I had gone, I had gone to Peru the year before for an ayahuasca thing that I had been on, and I had a liver disease. I had a serious liver problem, said cancer of the liver. So anyway, so here, fast forward a year later, I've got these cancer tumors and it's getting pretty bad. And my girlfriend says, well, why don't you come on over to Brazil? I'm going to be working in a Badiana with John of God, right? And so I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a whirl. What the heck? I'll give it a whirl. So she says, well, how soon can you be here? And I said, well, let me check tickets. And I was in Brazil, and 3 days later, boom, it was just spur of the moment. I ended up showing up in Brazil. So she met me in Brasilia, and she says, well, you're early. We have 4 or 5 days to just do whatever. She says, I've heard about these wonderful waterfalls in this area, the Chapada National Forestry area up in, and it was 3.5 hours from where we were, and
Mhm.
opposite direction from Abadiania. But anyway, so I said, sure, let's do it. Let's do it. She said, we can do some hiking and blah, blah, blah. So I said, yeah, I would love to see these sacred waterfalls. And so anyway, so we head up there. And the next morning, I get up and I walk into the health food store, and I meet a bunch of people, and I town shaman, and a couple of days later I meet another town shaman. Anyway, through these meetings of the locals there, I'm told about where these sacred waterfalls are and given some directions as to where they are. So my girlfriend Adele Good, and we decided to go to this one. It was called Agua Fria. So we go down into Agua Fria, and they had a camping pousada, which is a camping area, and it was run by this man that they call him Tattoo. Anyway, so Tattoo tells us how to get down to the waterfalls and blah, blah, blah. So we go and we do all that, and it's beautiful. And we swim, and it's this water, you can drink it. It's so beautiful. We come back up, and Tattoo invites us to have a meal. So we have a meal. And during the conversation in the meal, he says, how'd you girls like to see this crystal vein next door? There's like 2-3 kilometers of a solid crystal vein that's about a meter across and about a meter to a meter and a half high. And I'm thinking, solid crystal wall, 2 miles? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
Looks at me, I look at her, and we're like, yeah. And so there's, and he also says, well, there's crystals laying all over, blah, blah, blah. It's a beautiful area. And it's right next door. Well, next door, we're talking hundreds of hectares right in between. And each hectare is like 2.5 acres. So, and we're talking a lot of long ways to get over there. But anyway, so he says, well, let me call my neighbor and I'll see if I can get their nephew to take you. Right. So, okay. So we're on, we're going. So we drive over there and we wait for this kid to come, and open up the gate. And his Leomar, who's just this fabulous, fabulous young man. So he takes us in. We go meet the people, his uncle, and the people that own the property. And there's these huge crystals. I mean, these are as tall as I am, 5.
Wow.
Amazing crystals. They're all over the place, So anyway, so we head off to head down to this crystal, vein. We're all excited. We're picking up crystals as we're walking, and it's just like amazing. And so we get down there, and it's hot. I mean, it's really, really warm. And it's quite a 5-kilometer little trip to get down to that area. So we get down there, and he says, well, let's go, there's a little cave about another 1.5 kilometers or so. Let's go and just sit in the cave, and it's cool in the cave. And I was like, sure, let's do it. So we're already gone this far. We might as well. And mind you, this is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's nothing but wilderness here. We're in 700, 700 hectares of land, which is, we're talking about 2,100 acres. It's just massive, massive. So we go down into this little area, and there's like a rock outcropping, and he lifts up the bushes to open up for the cave, and my mouth just literally dropped. I mean, I just went, oh my God, that's a Templar cross. What is that doing in the middle of Brazil?
Right. In the middle of nowhere, no less.
I started figuring this thing out, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh my God. I told my girlfriend Adele, I said, oh my God. I said, this looks exactly like one of the crosses that I saw in Dome, France. I think this might be a really old cross. And I was just like, my mind was just going a mile a minute, So I interviewed lAgdMl right on the spot, which took a while to get that translated. But and come to find out, yes, the Templars were there. The locals, they all know about it. They all have rumors about it. And, they even create, if you go into the markets, they even create all this chainmail jewelry and chainmail stuff. And, it's just a lot.
It's part of their heritage, basically.
Yeah, you bet it. Yeah, you bet, especially in that area, it's their heritage. So, so it just, completely knocked my socks off. I really was not even prepared for that.
No kidding. So
what do I do with this,
No kidding. I'm just like, did you venture in? Or like, were you allowed to go in?
We sat in the mouth of the cave. The cave actually goes back probably about, probably a good 6 meters back into 6 or 7 meters. It kind of goes off to the right as you get in. So there's a large area as you first, come into the opening of the cave that you can actually sit, and it's nice and damp and cool in there. So we actually sat in there, but we really didn't explore much that day.
Right.
We had to get back. It was getting late, so we needed to kind of head back into town that day. But I got the agreement from the young man that I could come back at any time. And he said, absolutely, absolutely. He'd bring me back anytime. And he has let me in. He would go back in when I rediscovered the cave, which, there was a whole lot of things that happened that year, that right after I discovered the cave, I had a liver transplant, my house burned to the ground, it was just some minor things, just a few setbacks.
Just minor setbacks. Oh, sure. Let's go with minor setbacks. But
I had to decide to check my career that I had studied for 8 years for, right? I was an art professor.
Right.
So I had to decide that I had to just walk away from that, and not look back and just do this.
So your life dramatically changes, not just because, hey, I discovered a Templar cave, because that's something that happens every day, but your life literally changes. It's like an awakening in a way.
Well, the fire was like an initiation by fire. It really was. I actually saw myself in the fire the night that it had happened. We went to another cabin, a piece of property that we have that night. And during the night, I dreamt that I was in the middle of the fire, and that everything was swirling around me, and that everything was turning back into the elements and recreating something. But I didn't know what. I painted it. I actually have a painting here in my bedroom that I painted that.
Wow.
But so I knew something significant was happening. And the odd thing is that all my friends were saying is like, why aren't you upset? I wasn't upset.
Because I found a Templar cave. Come on.
It's like, no, I wasn't upset about losing my home.
For sure.
Upset about losing my artwork, because I was
for sure
something years, and I lost, I had bronzes that literally vaporized in that fire. I mean, it was
Wow.
seriously hot fire, 3,800 degrees. I mean, it burned
Wow.
everything but Willie Nelson. I have,
Willie Nelson survives a fire.
yeah,
Of
literally,
course he did.
such a crack up in the show. We get to the property after this fire, and there's Willie Nelson sitting in the ashes, and he's the only one that survived of all
But
the.
he would. It's Willie Nelson.
And then I found
Oh,
Leonardo da Vinci in a ceramic bust that I had done of Leonardo. He was still intact. So, you
mhm.
know, it was just, it was really odd. But anyway, so, here I come back from Brazil after discovering this cave, and my mind is just going in miles per hour, just going crazy. I come back, 9 days later, my home burns down. And 5 weeks later, I have a liver transplant, right? So it was like I had a whole year. I told myself, okay, you're just going to take a year, Kathleen, and just relax, heal from this major thing, and figure out what you're going to do with your future.
Mhm.
Just decide what you're going to do here, because this is big. This is big, right? So by the end of that year, I was still thinking about the Templar Cave, but I was thinking about it in terms of taking people on tours to see it.
Mhm.
And I was taking people on tours to Egypt and, India and other places. And I thought, well, this would be great. I'll take people into Brazil. So the first tour that I scheduled was in 2017. And what happened is there was some political things going on with our current person in the White House,
Yes.
and the person in Brazil, he basically pissed him off. And so no one could get visas to Brazil in the middle of my tour.
It just seems like a bad dream, doesn't it? Like,
so, so I'm like, well, I'm going in.
oh,
So I went
oh.
anyway, of course, and what ended up happening was they had a huge fire that year, and it wiped out everything. But I was invited to come back the following year, and I met a photographer who actually used to work for Jacques Cousteau, who's pretty
Very
decent.
cool.
Right?
Yes.
And he says, "Well, I will offer to film it for you. When you do rediscover the cave, when you come back next year, I will film it for you." So,
Wow. Wow.
right. So
Yeah.
this all falls together in that trip in 2017. But in 2018, when I returned
Mm.
to try to find the cave, there are no landmarks. The terrain has completely transformed. I don't recognize anything, nothing.
Wow.
That I knew for sure that was in the direction of the cave was a plateau. It was sort of off to the right. There was this mountain that was plateaued, and
Mm.
that's the only thing. So we tromped around for 3 days trying to rediscover this cave, not finding anything. And my photographer was just kind of fit to be tied. He was worried because the grass was really high, and he was worried about snakes and ticks and, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, I'm going to find this. I know it's here. I'm going to
Mhm.
find it. And so that was a completely intuitive thing. The third day, I finally found this old burnt sign that was metal that said grotto, that had been, somebody had left whatever a long time, but I knew that grotto meant cave.
Mhm.
So, right. So I finally found that, and it got me going in the direction. There's no paths. The paths are all completely overgrown and completely, so there's no paths. So we're literally tromping through 3.5 feet of brush and grass this whole way to get down here. But then the next thing, after 4 or 5 kilometers, I found the crystal vein. I found the crystal vein. So it's like, okay, now
I'm
I know
close.
I'm close. I looked
Yes.
off from the crystal vein, and it's like, well, now which way do I go? Do we go this way or do we go this way? So I went both ways, and until I happened to sit. I was tired, and so I sat down and I took a breath, and it was like, I looked off and I went, oh my God, I think it's over here. And my, Trajano, my photographer, is looking at me like, oh my God, are you out of your mind? You want to go down further into this mess? And I'm like, I'm going. I think that I saw a shadow. It was below a rock, sort of a rock, hilly little rock area. And I just went intuitively. I knew that that was it. And I started running, basically. I was like running through these bushes. And he sat back. He says, well, you go down there and let me know.
You do the hard work and I'll
Yeah, I'm
follow you.
carrying this equipment, He says, I'm not carrying all this equipment until I know for sure. So I get down there almost to it, and then I know for sure. And I'm like, Trajano, get down here. This is it. This is it. And sure enough, I cut out, cut some branches and cut some things away. And there it was. There it
Wow.
was.
Wow.
So here we are, of 700 hectares in the middle of wilderness. I found the cave again. I just
found the cave. Now, is this a large cave? Is this a small cave? Is this?
Oh, you can walk into it.
Okay, yeah. No, curiosity, because what do you think they would have used it for?
Well, honestly, I think that it may have initially been a gold mine.
Oh, see, now that's interesting.
Well, if you put the crystal together,
yeah,
and there was a whole lot of crystal laying, like when I don't know if you know anything about getting gold, but
yes,
where you find gold, you always find crystal. Where you find crystal, you don't always find gold, but they have a tendency to be together. And there was a whole lot of crushed crystal all around the mouth of the cave for, probably a kilometer at least in the area. There was a lot of crushed crystal. So it led me to believe that that may have been at one time, there was no indication of it when there was absolutely nothing in there then. But, I think
but because they do have like they do make a point of, like when they stake their claims sort of thing, right? They'll put a cross, or they'll put certain, I guess, letters, numbers.
Right. And there was also some graffiti inside the mouth of the cave, and some of it looked to be Templar. And I'm not going to say for certain at this point, because there was so much graffiti that, teenagers had been in there and put JB plus CR, that kind of stuff was in there. So I'm going to really have to do some more investigation in there to, to check that out a little bit further.
To look behind the graffiti, right?
Right.
Wow.
So
that would make sense, though. That would make sense if they're staking a claim and they're putting their mark, and they were businessmen also, after all.
Absolutely.
So bankers,
Leonia told me that her great grandfather, when he came in from Portugal, when he came there to buy that property that was below the cave, that's what he came for. He came looking for gold.
Did he find it?
I don't know. She didn't say.
See, yeah, because again, curiosity. Did they mine it all, or did he was, to prove your theory?
I do know that, even back then, that huge piece of land that he bought had to have been really expensive.
Have they looked for other markers on the land?
Well, it's interesting. The Brazilian people don't really care about history. They're more meat and potatoes people. It's like, well, can you eat it? Is it going to give you a job? Or
right.
build your home? Is it, that's really, they're very practical. They're very in the moment, they're practical. They're very practical. And so, there are two of the primary historians in Brazil, and I met them both. Luis Salvi was one, and this other gentleman that I met at this other place, which is a whole nother story. She was actually the daughter of a Nazi, and she ended up with this big piece of property there, in Alto Paraíso. She's got this beautiful Buzada there, and it's just a Salbento is what it's called. It's my swimming hole when I go there. Right. But anyway, so I was there to meet with her, to interview her, And I met the other historian, one of the main historians in Brazil, and he said the same thing. He says Brazilian people, they're just not interested in the history. They really, it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. You can talk to the locals and get more information, but typically people don't. They're just not that interested in the history.
So do they, I mean, they must have a degree of oral history that gets passed down. So they at least hold on to that part of the lineage or the history, I suppose. Would you think they would let you look at the property and look for markers yourself? Because it would really be interesting to see just how far out they delved.
Yeah, they've agreed to allow me go in with a metal detector.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
A metal detector over there already that I ordered. And so they really, agreed to allow me to go in and do some more investigation. And who knows what I'm going to find. But intuitively, I have a feeling that I'm going to find some significant artifacts, Templar artifacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would stand to reason if they were mining the cave, for example, that they would have, something very close by, to reside in or to process all of this in, like something.
Right. Well, there's also water that's going down the hill that goes down to this property, right? That could very well have been used as a sluice box.
Mm-hmm.
They have this whole water system at this farm where this woman owns that's just right down the hill from it.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole water system, and she said that had been there for hundreds of years. She didn't know. So it may even have been created by the Templars themselves. But when I saw the water system going down the hill, I instantly thought, oh, well, it's perfect, right?
That's right. That's right.
The bronze axe, the bronze axe that was there, it was like, oh, well, were they using that to chip away at the quartz? Was that happening? I don't know. But I'm hoping to get more information the next time I go. Each time I go, I get more information. Each time I go, I just happen to people that run into people that tell me. And now every time I visit, because I've been there 4 or 5 times, now every time I come there, people come to me with information. People come to me to say, "Oh, so and so would like to talk with you about the Templars." They know that you're interested in the Templars. So now I have people coming to me like this information with the Kalinga. So I'm really interested to see what they've got to say. Why would they have any information about Templars? And I even suspect that they may have relics.
I was going to say, wouldn't it be something if they had relics? Because that's definitely something that they would just probably, tuck away and not give much of a second thought to if they're not really historically inclined.
Exactly.
But it would be no significance to them. But wow, world significance.
Yes.
There are not a lot of Templar relics that have been found, at least none that have actually surfaced up until, Carl Cookson and Hamilton White. Let's face it. With the Portuguese cache hoard that they have found, it's very interesting to see these items. So with that being said, you could be really on the heels of that yourself. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, I just, my heart just skips a beat every time I think about going back there because there's just so much there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've just barely tapped the surface over there. And, in terms of interviews, in terms of, possible relics, and in terms of some really hard concrete evidence to back up this cave that is out here in the middle of nowhere. It's just,
it's really hard because you've got this, basically this Templar cross stamped, literally right there at the entrance of this cave. So to me, that's a no-brainer. That to me would be proof.
Right.
But is it indisputable into the eyes of an archaeologist might say, oh well, could have come in, Columbus could have put it there.
Right.
What is your feedback with that? Like, what is your response to something like that?
Well, my response is of that I'm certain it's a Templar cross. I have it corroborated by
Mhm.
Templar experts, a cross Templar expert in
Yes.
Portugal. I went
Yes.
to Portugal to meet with this man, and you'll see it in the documentary. He was shocked.
Excellent.
I mean, he was absolutely shocked when he saw this, and he said, "Yes, it's definitely Templar related," and and he was just blown away by the whole thing. So I know,
Yes.
I have no doubt about that. That doesn't, there's no doubt about that. But what I would
Perfect.
like to find is, in addition to this, the mill wheel that I found in the Bronze Axe, in addition to those artifacts, I would also like to find some things that we know are Templars, that are associated, sword,
Mhm.
pieces of swords, chainmail, things that would have survived what 700-800 years. That's what I
Mhm.
have to find when I go back. So that's what I'll be looking for.
Oh, this one's for you in chat. There's a lot of comments I can read to you later, but hi Kathleen, Shelley here.
Oh,
So, hi back. So, um, yeah, I mean, what about, I mean, Templar swords are hard, at least, at least on the other side of the pond, because it's believed that many would have been buried with their swords. I'm told they're very difficult to come across.
I
Um,
totally.
however, if they brought them to Brazil, it's not
Mhm.
like they would have used them. So the chances of you locating one would be really good.
Right.
However, you know, have you found a graveyard? Have you found like there's got to be something somewhere? These men lived. They integrated into the community. They had families. They died.
Right. I did find a graveyard,
Oh,
and
perfect. This is just like way too much fun. You're like the gift that keeps on giving.
I did exactly. That's exactly what this. I literally felt like all I had to do was go to Alta Paraiso, and it was a magnet for this stuff. I mean, it
Wow.
just was beyond my comprehension. Just, it was like, okay, In fact, the fellow that owns the Buzada, he gave me this gem and said, "This is your destiny. You need to complete this. This is your
Wow.
destiny." So,
Hmm.
what do you do with that?
Hmm.
But yeah, it just keep on finding. I just keep on, meeting people that give me more and more information.
Hmm.
And like I said, the area of Alto Paraiso and Moena, St. George. I
St.
mean,
George, I love that. Yes.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that
it's too coincidental.
no, that's yeah, I don't believe much in coincidence. I think you're right on the money with that. Like when you found the cemetery, did you find crosses, headstones, crosses, or did they still remain incognito even at that point, not to be found?
If you're familiar with tempered grapes at all, which
Yeah.
I'm sure you are, right?
Yes.
I went to Scotland to
Yes.
see what I could find. I went to Temple, and I went to
Yeah.
this Clare, Roslyn and things, and um, they're very plain. They're very plain. If
Mm-hmm.
there was anything there at all,
Mm-hmm.
there's usually just very plain. So what I saw in this graveyard were very plain crosses. I mean, there was
Mm-hmm.
nothing indicative of Templars having been buried there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know.
Do you think it's something that they try to, you say when they, they come in, they sort of blended in, they kind of went quiet,
Yeah.
in fear of being found. Do you think that remained right to the very end? They just sort of shelved the Templar past, their Templar heritage or
Well,
past, and
after 1320, there wasn't much of a future. There certainly wasn't any future for the Templars in back
mhm,
in Portugal. I mean, they had become the Knights of Christ at that point, and they
that's right.
retained their properties, in
Mhm,
1320, 1325. But there really wasn't much future for them
mhm,
at that point. And also, I think was in 1325 they were allowed to marry. The whole order changed. Everything changed.
mhm,
Not stay. Why not stay in Brazil and
mhm.
marry into couples? Why not?
Yeah.
You have literally, Michelle, this place, Alto Paraíso, high paradise is because that's exactly what it is. It is a high paradise. You have the most beautiful terrain there. Like I said, if you own a couple hectares of land, you're going to have pineapples and guava and these huge avocados, and you're surrounded by these waterfalls, these sacred lands that have been sacred to, the indigenous people for thousands and thousands of years. And it's just a magnificent paradise to be in.
And they really had a sense also of everything, sacred geometry, sacred power spots throughout the world. I mean, they would build their temples on really sacred spots. They seemed to know where the energy places were, Yes. So this was one of those places. Did they
Absolutely.
create it to be that much more? Did they add to that?
Like I said, according to the professor at the University of Brasilia, she teaches sacred geometry there. She's doing her research, her personal research, is she believes that the Templars, which she told me in her words, because she doesn't speak English, she said they laid magic grids. That's what she told me. They laid magic grids. She says, why do you think all the people have come?
Yes.
And it's like, wow, they recreated a sovereign nation. They left Europe. They created Portugal as a sovereign nation. That they accepted all these people from all over. I mean, the Cathars, the Gnostics, all these people. I mean, even the Moors and the Saracens and the Islam. Once they conquered them and they cleared, they took over Portugal as their own. They invited people to stay. They wanted a sovereign nation. When they saw that being threatened it was obviously being threatened by the church. I mean, let's face it, the king at the time, who was pro-Templar in Portugal in the 1300s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Died in 1325, leaving a very young son.
That's right. Who was pretty much groomed from very young.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do at that point? In France, the Templars went off in all different directions. The surviving Templar went into La Rochelle, into the Bay of La Rochelle, and they took off and went to Scotland. And I think just as many went ahead and went down into Portugal, because there was already, there's more Templar castles in Portugal than any other country that I've ever seen.
Wow.
So that I have personally firsthand seen. And I've traveled Portugal twice. And there are more, there's just more castles there. They created that country. That Portugal would not be Portugal if it hadn't been Porto de Grail, if it had not been for the Templars. They created it for that. They wanted a sovereign nation. They wanted something that was separate from the whole Catholic idea. Even though that they were sanctioned by the Pope, they followed the traditional belief system that Jesus really taught. They believed in that. They believed in what Jesus taught. So they had a vested interest in recreating that sovereign nation. And I think that they went from that, at that point, they went into North America, they went into South America, they went into places looking for, countries and areas to colonize, to recreate that. And I think that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, like the whole Essene movement, right? The Essenes, like just the whole, the way that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were supposed to have just taught and lived. Which is what the Cathars based their way of life on also. Right. So
and, now there's a gal, Lina Jones. She's just become a recent friend of mine, and she's uncovering now documentation that Mary Magdalene was actually a bona fide teacher.
Wow. Wow. Look at that.
Right?
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Woman, because I'm just like, wow. I've known this intuitively because of my own experiences, right?
Yes.
With that line. Yes. But to see this documentation come forward, this is much. This is just wow. This is wow. This is so amazing. So, if the Templars they're protecting a bloodline, possibly, if that's one of the agendas. That's what the man told me in Dome, France in 2009, the curator of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
He said to me, you know what the Templars were protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I have a general idea. I had some ideas, but nothing was concrete. And he said, he looked right straight at me and he said, they were protecting the bloodline of Jesus and Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, okay.
Mm-hmm. That's a big pill to swallow, but that is the theory.
Yeah,
that is the theory. That's the big one.
So if they were protecting this bloodline and they had an agenda to create sovereign nations and eventually a world, which is what I think is their ultimate agenda, to create a world of, harmony and people cohabitating, equality of all belief systems. And they wanted a bloodline member to rule. Mm-hmm. And there's some indication, Freddie Silva and I have had this conversation. There's some indication that the kings of Portugal were possibly descendants and may have been of the bloodline themselves. We know that French, obviously, in France that was going on. Mm-hmm. So there is indication that that's also, that's also what was going on. So
away from the prying eyes, I will put that in this context, the prying eyes of the church.
Well, absolutely. Yes. And so if they were coming in to South America, into Brazil, and they were coming in possibly into North America, there's evidence now, we're finding some evidence that they also came in the 1300s.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
If this woman, we're just completely speculating here, but if this woman in Brazil is correct, and they were laying grids for this to happen, magic as she called it. Mm-hmm. And what do we have here in North America? What do we have? Give us your weak and you're tired and you're poor and you're da-da-da-da-da, right? Mm-hmm. And we got it, we have that. That's up until recently, that's been undisputed.
That's true.
And so we have that. And in Alto Paraiso, it's the same thing. You have the same thing in Alto Paraiso. I don't think that's an accident.
No, I don't. I believe that you're correct. I believe you're correct with that. I think that you're going to start uncovering a lot. You've got the ball rolling now, and so it's in motion. The wheels are in motion, and I really think that obviously doors have been opening for you where you least expect it. Yeah. Every turn you make, it's like, oh, here's what's behind door number 1. Here's door number 2. It's just, I think 2021 may be your year, really.
I really do have that strong feeling. And, as I mentioned, I did this research in the Rosicrucian Library where I uncovered that there had been a band of knights, a group of knights that were created in 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar. And they were created, this family was created to protect the builders of the temple, the second building of the temple, right? So that went all the way to 70 AD, right? 586 BC to 70 AD. We've got this family of knights that come forward.
Yes. Wow. So and then they just disappear, basically.
Well.
Or did it continue on?
But they were also in 70, all the way up to 70, they had to have been contemporary with guess who? Mm-hmm. Guess Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
That's right.
Why did Jesus and Mary Magdalene, why did Mary Magdalene come into Marseille specifically? Mm-hmm. How did you know? Why did she come into Marseille? Huh? Mm-hmm. So who came with her? Joseph or Mary, Martha, and there was one other person, I can't think of his name now off the top of my head. But they all came in on this ship. This is what the nun told me when I went.
Joseph of Aramea brought them in, right? The 3 Marys.
Right, the 3 Marys, exactly.
Yes.
When I was led, whatever, by whatever,
Mhm.
to the cathedral in Marseille. This is what the nun also told me too. She said, she told me she'd been waiting for me. She learned English in college and she was waiting for me to come. This woman was in her 50s. And she hugged me like I was her long lost daughter and was weeping. I've been waiting for you, madame. I've been waiting for you, madame. You must follow this path. And she sent me up to where Mary Magdalene had lived, right, in St. Baume, and with instructions, which I followed through, which I won't get into all that.
Yeah, yeah.
We can save that for
Well,
something later.
sure, but it's also your personal experience, right?
Well, it was,
That's
right,
right.
my personal
Yes.
experience. So she
Mhm.
hustles me into her office and she writes this map for me, and she tells me all about, the Templars having protected Mary Magdalene and the children, and just tells me this whole story about them coming into Marseille and how that they had shared the true teachings, the true teachings.
But Templars, now in the time of Mary Magdalene, that's like way back from
Well,
anything that we have documented.
well,
Really.
you bet it is. So, but what
Wow.
I'm saying is they may not have been called Templars at
No,
that.
but they would have been knights. They would have been
Right.
soldiers, protectors, an organization.
They were an organization of knights. There's no doubt about it. And they
Yeah.
existed all the way up until 70 AD. So they were contemporary. They had to have been. They
Yes.
had to, right? So
Hmm.
these families that came forward to 70 AD is what I'm getting ready to go back into and do some more investigation. And I have a couple of researchers in Portugal now, this one particular man who has agreed to discuss some things with me.
I
So,
like that. Discuss things.
so
You know it's
what
going to be
the
good.
outcome of this discussion is going to we'll see. He's also invited me into the tunnels as well, so we'll see. Um,
Yes.
so he and I had mentioned to him that I am on this search, right? And he agreed that I'm onto something. I'm definitely onto something. So if that's the case, again, when the Templars went we fast forward to the early 1100s, right? Here
Hmm.
they arrive in Jerusalem. They arrive in the Holy Land. They're supposed to be protecting pilgrims 9 nights, right? 9 nights.
But what was there, like 50 miles of road or like 100 miles of road or something ridiculous like that for 9 guys?
Right. So there's 9 guys
Oh,
who are supposed to be protecting pilgrims, to come in. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
no.
What they did though, was they made a beeline for the Temple Mount. And
Yes.
they made their fortress and their stronghold, the stables, right above the tunnels underneath the Temple Mount. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How did they know where to go?
That's
Why?
a good question.
Right? How did they know where to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, we're speculating. I'm speculating, but I think that this may have been passed down generationally. I think they may have been waiting for the right time. Timing was very important to the Templars. The timing was very important to anyone with an esoteric belief system. Timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that they had information. They knew where to go. They went into the tunnels. We found there's evidence when the tunnels now have been excavated. We've recently found solid evidence that the Templars were in fact in those tunnels. So we know down there. So it's my premise, and I believe very strongly that they were descendants of possibly the original knights that were created in 586 BC.
Wow, that's that's mind-blowing because there's like nothing out there with respects to that. Well, I mean, probably the Vatican vaults, but there's a lot of stuff that they probably have because they've stagnated our knowledge and our history
You dig through the old books. This is what I started doing at, in the Rosicrucian Library. I started digging through these old books, and I have a friend there that's a librarian that works there. And every time I walk in, she greets me with books, with this pile of books. And every time there's stuff I need to see that's in those books. And in one of these books, it happened to mention these knights that were created in 586, that are all the way up to 70 AD. Right?
Well, I mean, it does make sense. I mean, Christianity, well, I guess Catholicism came into be with Constantine, right? And that whole movement was a different thing. So things would have been pretty hairy at that point. But again, 586 BC, like that's Jesus. That's way before any of that.
That's right.
So that's crazy. That's crazy.
So how were these people chosen? I mean, you have to think in the context of these people. They just didn't arbitrarily say, "Hey, you want to be a Templar?"
No.
You want to be a right? That's not the way they were chosen. Families were chosen for specific things. Some were priests. Yes. Some families were carpenters. Some families were this. Some families were that. So what was, why were these specific people chosen to be the knights to protect the builders of the temple, the second building of the temple? Why these specific knights? So that makes me wonder, okay, so were these families was there some type of esoteric history that even preceded them?
It would make sense. That they would follow in the footsteps of their forefathers. That would make a lot of sense.
It would make sense. It would. It's extremely difficult to find, information. But then I did find out, and I've been invited to Jerusalem, which is another place that's on my list. But I did find out that there was a chapel that has been recently uncovered in Jerusalem. That is where Mary Magdalene and many of the people after the crucifixion stayed, and they hid before they left the stake.
Wow. So that's quite a find.
My hope is that there's graffiti in there. And so when I go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be going into this place. I'm going to be finding, I'm going to be looking for anything that I can find, anything find that's going to connect families, genealogies. I'm going to be looking for that kind of information, interviewing people. We'll see what opens up in Jerusalem. I mean, after what has happened in Brazil and what's happened in Portugal and what's happened in Scotland, it's just like every time I go somewhere, the next thing I know, I'm getting all this new information that connects to other bits and just this.
You're connecting the dots, I think.
Yeah.
You've done this amazing documentary. It almost sounds to me like you're going to be having a sequel somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
With the amount of information surfacing.
Yeah, that's the idea. And we negotiated for that. And obviously with the COVID, I mean, who's going to give you a contract for a sequel if you're in the middle of a COVID and you can't travel?
Sure. Yes.
It's not very practical. So, yes, I'm definitely planning on I'm going to be filming in every country I go to. I'll be filming in Brazil again. I'll be doing more filming in Brazil. I found I've gotten a new photographer, Isaac Romano, who is just absolutely unbelievable photographer. He's really wonderful. And he's willing to travel anywhere with me. He's willing to go wherever with me. So I will be filming all of these sites that I go to.
I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Do you think that, and I mean, I'm just throwing this out there because whenever somebody comes across this sort of a discovery, let's face it, this is something that can alter history as we know it. And there are some academics who really aren't interested in watching that happen. There is, the church itself, let's say, who would not really want to see that happen. Have you gotten any resistance going to these places? Or
I have. I've gotten a little, I've got people Well, yeah, I've had people, challenge my credentials, challenge this, challenge that, and I ask them, what are you doing with your life? you know,
Yeah.
what do you do with your life? In other words, get a life.
Yeah.
I just, I'm
Well,
not.
you get those people, let's face it, when you talk about Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, they are steadfast. No, he died on the cross. That's not a thing.
Yeah, right. And there's some speculation they didn't die on the cross. He didn't actually die. There was some speculation of that. Now I don't know if I buy into that or not, but there is some speculation, and there's people that are researching that. There's a group of people that are researching that too. So who
Mm-hmm.
knows where that's going to go?
Mm-hmm.
That's particularly my forte.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that Christianity was a broad spectrum of beliefs. It was not, a canonized biblical that was passed down through this Bible. That
Mm-hmm.
was the way Christianity was practiced back, in the first
Mm-hmm.
century.
Right.
And Turkey, Cappadocia. I've been to Turkey. I was there in 2018 or 19. What I saw there were numerous. There was at least 65 little chapels throughout this complex, this underground complex where people. This is where the Christians went to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is where they came to hide from the Romans. There are as many crosses in those places as there were chapels.
Wow.
And I have these all photographed. I photographed them all.
Wow.
I was fascinated with the different types of crosses and the different types of, they typically all had, scenes from the Bible, biblical scenes from the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
but they were all done artistically in different styles. They weren't done in the same styles. And these were all between the 1st and the 3rd century. So,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We have a broad spectrum of what Christianity really looked like.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think a lot of texts are starting to surface with that also. That's the thing. People, you brought up a certain way with a certain belief system, and then you get to that point where things start to contradict, and people's like, I want real answers, and they start looking elsewhere. I have a question for you in chat. How much have the Knights Templar influenced the Freemasons? Second part of the question, what are some rituals and beliefs that both groups share? If you can tell.
Wow.
Might not be able to. Yeah.
I didn't really answer about the Freemasons because I don't really, I have Masons friends that are Masons, but I don't really know enough about their rituals and belief systems to answer that. And in terms of their influence, the Mason being influenced by the Templars, I'm sure they were on some level. But then again, I think that most of the esoteric belief systems and practices and the things that that the Templars were doing, I think they took that underground. The only lineage of Templars that can show that they were a continual lineage is in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
The only one.
Yeah.
So, in all the other countries, there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that there's so many people that say yes, that the Masons came directly out of the dissolution of the Templars, and that those same people became Masons. Now, there's evidence that some of the same family members, the same descendants, have Masons, but whether they're actual core beliefs and rituals, I would suspect that they're probably not a lot in common, because I think that most of the Templar beliefs, like I said, I think they went underground with. And, that some of that stuff is available now, but the people are still holding on to it that have that information. They're still keeping it pretty quiet.
Yeah, because I know I recall reading that, and this is Hermit Crab. I love that name. It's a great handle. He says the Templars were wiped out by the papacy on Friday the 13th. I agree, but many got away. and
Yes.
some actually made their way to Scotland. Obviously, we spoke of that earlier, and sort of blended in. And some of them did go on to continue constructing, but they had to blend in to a
Yes.
degree, right? To keep themselves incognito. And I thought,
Right.
oh, that was interesting. Now they said that they went on to be, what we know as the Masons, and I'm with you on that one. I don't know necessarily that they did, but it did mean that some maybe didn't, just to keep something going and just to take that, that watchful eye off of them and to continue in one form or another being able to practice. But like again, I'm with you on that. The rituals I think were very, very different.
Hmm.
Um, so um, yeah, it's definitely fascinating. I think there's going to be more and more information coming to light, especially with discoveries such as yours and Hamilton's and Carl's, and things are coming to light. You can't just pretend it's not there. And for those people who truly believe that, all of the Templars were literally decimated, I think there's so much more evidence that's out there now that show they went on
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
they're dating all of these finds that they're coming across.
Exactly. And I think that there's also there was beliefs that they would return at some point in time. Now, here we go again. I happen to have been in Tomar, Portugal in 2019
Mm,
in October, when the Templars they have an annual procession that comes down from the Convent de Cristo, which was the Templar castle, and they come down through the city and they go all the way to the chapel that's dedicated to Mary Magdalene in Santa Maria do Arrabal. Right,
mhm.
this is something that they do every year. They have this process, this procession that they go down. However, on this particular time that I was there in October 12th, 13th, 14th, of that whole period, they had just signed an international pact of Templars. All the Templar organizations became united on that day,
Wow, that is huge.
worldwide.
That is huge. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And I
That's
documented the
fantastic.
whole thing. Yeah, I documented the whole thing. There
Wow.
were this agreement was signed. I believe it was signed at the castle in Almaral, which is not very far. It's right down the Teja River uh, from Tomar. It's just
Hmm.
outside Tomar, not very far. But so we were there. Myself and my photographer were there to film this whole thing, and I actually interviewed and spoke with several of the members as they were walking. There's thousands of Templars, and I mean, this footage I have is just amazing. It's just
Hmm.
priceless. And I walked the whole procession with them, and I'm interviewing. And so the interesting thing that has happened is that there's women and male Templars, just both female and male. And so one of the things that they had to agree with this international agreement was that all countries could allow to have male and female
Hmm.
Templars.
But
Okay.
there were female Templars
There
back
were.
in the
I was
day.
just gonna. Yep. I was just
Hello,
gonna.
Joan of Arc. She
Yeah.
came from a really rich Templar lineage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there were whole convents that were run by female Templars that were training female Templars.
Yeah.
So yes, okay, this would have been consistent with the beliefs of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, whether or not they were together, had any descendants, or whatever.
Hmm.
Jesus believed in the equality of male and female, enough
Hmm.
so he had a female apostle that we're now finding from this woman that I mentioned, right?
Hmm.
Enough so that she became an apostle, right? So we have this belief system of equality of men and women, and then we have this carried forward. All of a sudden, boom! In the 1100s, from 11 to 1300s, boom! We have male and female Templars.
Hmm.
Now, that was completely against the belief systems of the church at that point in time.
Hmm.
It's not consistent. And I think that's why it's been so difficult for us to uncover that truth, because
Mm-hmm.
so much of that, the evidence of that was buried, that we're just now finding out about this stuff.
Well, I mean, they buried it. I think a lot of that has to do with, again, the church just creating division, where I think, they all tried to keep it unified. And I think the representation just of the whole amalgamation of all the Templars across, the globe just shows that unity once
Yeah.
again.
Once
It's,
again. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, it's just a full
So
circle, full
it
circle.
tells me something's up. It tells me something's up. And I've been told enough by these current Templars and Masons, throughout the world in different places that I've been, that the time is now for these things to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And, the one in Brazil gave me the gem and said, this is your destiny to reveal these things.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
there's any accident that these things are being revealed at this point in time. Again, timing is everything. Timing is everything. And this is an esoteric belief system, and I think that originally, if we want to take this all the way back to the days of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which I've done
Yes.
research, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They tried to bring about, a revolution of ideas and whatnot, right?
We know how that worked out.
And you see how that worked out. The timing was really not correct. But what they did was plant the seed,
Yes.
right? What they did was plant the seed. So if you're coming forward, you see this happen again numerous times. And then, you see this happen again with the Renaissance. You see this happen with the Templars bringing it about. And then were the Templars laying grids? Were they laying,
The seeds.
work
Yeah.
for a future generation,
Mm-hmm.
for these things to happen in a future generation? Did they see this? Did they know this? I believe they did.
With everything that they allegedly knew, I personally think what they were looking for was knowledge.
Absolutely.
I believe they went seeking knowledge. I don't believe, Freddie said it right. Men of wealth don't give up their wealth to basically go fortune or treasure hunting. They're not going to do that. The only thing they're going to give it up for is something worth dying for. That is knowledge. Many men have died for knowledge, especially sacred knowledge, something that needed to be hidden, something that needed to be protected.
Exactly.
I truly, truly believe that. Not that they didn't find a few cool relics along the way, for sure, but I truly believe they found something that they mastered and they continued to teach future generations. And man, I think they found the key.
I do too. I do too. And if you, again, go back into Tomar, and if you go into this amazing little chapel, Santa Maria do Olival, and you walk through it. This is where they buried the Templar Grand Masters for hundreds of years. They were buried there.
Mm-hmm.
There was someone, I can't remember who it was in Portugal, that dug them up, I guess, for some reason. I don't know what he was looking for. We don't know what happened to the bodies to this day, and we don't know what happened to whatever he dug up.
Mm-hmm.
But the chapel is still there. And if you walk into the chapel, there's several different stones that are Templar symbols that are on the ground, that are on the floorboards. But there's this little niche, there's this little room, and in this room is a statue of Mary Magdalene,
Mm-hmm.
their rendition of Mary Magdalene. And if you look up at this at the statue you have to be standing in a certain place. You have to be standing right directly below her, and you have to look up at a certain angle. And what you'll see is her hands like this praying.
Mm-hmm.
And in that is a key.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting right there.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
is the key.
Symbolism.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
why a key? It's a clue. It's another clue.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nobody's figured that out unless it's key of knowledge, key to whatever they're, like to I don't know, everlasting resurrection. Some believe that the Essenes had mastered physical ascension.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, Tibetans,
I tease Freddie. I says, I'm pretty sure you got it.
Tibetans certainly did. Tibetans were able to leave
Yes.
Tibetans,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, it was believed that they knew how to do it, in the Temple of Solomon.
Exactly. So if knights in 586 that had to have had some training and they had to have some family background in order to even be fit for knights.
Yeah.
What kind of information did they have? Maybe there was some relics from Solomon.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, has anybody ever stopped to think, when you walk into Rennes Chateau and you walk into the chapel, that the one demon that guards the door is the same demon that plagued Solomon? It's just,
Right.
I mean, if you really think about it,
Yeah.
the one that's
Right. Was that just an arbitrary, somebody decided, well, I'm just going to carve this today?
Or, right. Yeah. But there's a lot of curiosities, there's a lot of symbols out there, and there's a lot of speculation, and somebody knows what's going on. And I think that there are a lot of people coming close to getting a lot of this stuff figured out. And there's those who will continue to just speculate. I don't think we're ever going to know 100%.
I think that it's the time, and I think the time is coming forward, and we are going to know. And the other thing that's really fascinating about this connection with Solomon is the fact that the Templars entertained the king of Ethiopia. Okay, king of Ethiopia, and at Tomar, Portugal, and the Templars also went to Ethiopia. Now, what are they doing that? Okay, in Ethiopia, the Queen of Sheba, right?
Yes.
Had a son with Solomon.
Yes, that's correct.
And if you read I think it's the Kabra-Nagast, I think that's the name of it, the Ethiopian Bible, it talks about the son, Sheba sending her son to go meet his father. And what is he sent back with? The Ark of the Covenant.
It's believed.
Okay. But not just, I am convinced that it's not just the Ark of the Covenant. I think that he was also sent back with, Solomon's getting ready to die. He's an old man at this point. Right. His kingdom is being challenged at this point. He's setting things off. He's trying to protect these things, right? He wants to protect these things for future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you think everything went back with him?
Yeah, I think everything may have come back with him. If you read the Kabra-Nagast, it says that his captain or his general or whatever was given the scepter, the rod, and but that the ark went with the son and went back to Ethiopia. And when he came back to Ethiopia, suddenly we have a change from a matriarchal queen who runs the country to a patriarchal system. Boom. And all of a sudden we have Christianity, right? We have Hebrew, and right?
That's a good point. Yes. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And we have a chapel there that's guarding something that is guarded for generation after generation after generation by one family member that never leaves that site.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. There's something definitely very special there. There are a lot of theories with the Ark. I read something recently was there was an archaeologist, I mean, we're going back like 10, 15 years ago, who
Right.
uncovered one near the base of the Temple Mount and took photographs. And when you look inside that cave, the I mean Jerusalem, the Jewish government basically said Israel, the government said, no, we're not excavating anymore.
Mhm.
And he took photos, and when you're looking into this dark space and it's all covered in except for one whole end of it, and I'm like, they believe that there may have been like three or four of them. Have you ever heard that theory?
I haven't heard that theory. No, I haven't.
When I heard that, I'm kind of like, why? So is it is that something even bigger? Were they decoys?
Right, right.
Decoys to kind of throw everybody off, and then the real one gets tucked away somewhere. That would make sense to me.
It makes sense to me, and and that's something that that governments do, and certain
Yeah.
entities do. They throw misinformation out there
Yes.
to get people off on different tracks. And
Sure.
it happens. But my interest in the relationship between the Ethiopian king and the Templars in Portugal, and this was just not a chance meeting. This was a
Mm-hmm.
ongoing relationship where they traveled back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that all about? That there had to have been something extremely important. You just don't do that. You just don't travel from Ethiopia to Tomar to have dinner.
No, that's true. No, you're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong. It sounds like, I mean, there's clearly something very special there for somebody to be on guard 24/7, generation after generation after generation. Like it's a very, I mean, there's a devotion to God, but then there's a devotion. It's like,
Right.
you know,
There's a devotion to this place,
yes,
and
yes.
it even crossed my mind that this person that guards may even have oral knowledge that he just doesn't, I mean, who knows what form it is, what I mean? Whatever this is, this that he's protecting, who knows what form it's in? Is it a physical form? Is it information? What is it? We don't know
Hmm.
for sure, you know. But
That's,
once every 5 years, they bring out a mock ark, and they have this whole procession over there. And this happens every 5 years, and it still
hmm,
happens, and it's been happening for hundreds of years. So
hmm, hmm.
something's up with that situation over there, and I am planning on going over there and seeing what I can find out.
Well, I wish you luck with that. They don't seem to, he doesn't even really seem to come out and speak with anybody. You
Right,
see him every now and then, you'll catch him wandering around.
right.
If you're fortunate enough to lasso him and pry a few words out, it would be interesting. You would think that somewhere along the line, and like you say, maybe it is timing.
Yeah, it's
Maybe
time.
it is about timing for that secret to be told. Because how do you think the world would handle something like that? We can't even handle being on lockdown, or we bicker over my neighbor's not wearing a mask and isn't social distancing, and I'm just going to rat him out. We can't even agree on here, let
Right.
alone something of this magnitude.
Mhm. That
I
would
mean,
transform. It would transform the world. It would literally transform. There would be a
mhm,
transfiguration
yes,
worldwide, which
hmm,
ironically was one of the first installations I ever created, was called Transfiguration. But I've been researching this stuff for many, many years. But anyway,
there's a good comment here by,
we
again, Hermit the Crab.
take a state that people worldwide, globally, would have to be in such a receptive state. And what makes you in a receptive state? What makes you be receptive? Well, I was really receptive when I had a near death experience. That made me very receptive,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's how this stuff started happening for me. It was March 11th of 1990. I had a near death experience, and ever since then, All this information's been coming to me. I've been finding template caves. I've been running into nuns that say they've been waiting for me for 50 years. All these things have been happening to me since that happened. So it was like an awakening. It was an awakening. It was an awakening for me. That's exactly what happened. And what I experienced during that near death, in the near death where I was in that space, was that there would be a future time that we would experience globally that was very different from what it looks like today.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see it on an energetic level. And so what I saw was harmony, but everything was energetic. Everything was moving and energetic. It's very difficult to explain. I didn't see anything on a physical plane, but I know that since that near-death experience, I've been committed 100% to bringing that about.
Mm-hmm. So it was a true awakening. Literally, you woke up and then it's almost like your path was changed for you.
Yeah, instantly.
Yes. Hermit, I love the handle. I do. He says, I believe the Ethiopians are the true Israelites. The Ark of the Covenant is guarded in Ethiopia. And the true Israelites, there's been a lot that has been said about that also.
Yeah.
And it would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? That one of the original tribes.
Makes sense. Given the fact that it was Solomon's son, who's obviously descendant of Solomon, obviously.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right.
What's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was Ethiopian. His father was obviously Solomon. And so there would be reason to believe they would have had descendants.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course.
I mean, his line continued on. And they married and they married and they married, had children and had children and had children. So just from a bloodline perspective, absolutely, that would have to be true. And
not to mention, if I mean, you had the 12 tribes that sort of wandered aimlessly for 40 years, any one of them could have ended up, where did they all end up settling?
Exactly.
Over and above all of that. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a thing, Zach Mann says, I love tonight's show. Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing your research and experiences with us. See you all in 2021. Love and light to you all. That's nice. Thank you. As he's signing off. But it's been a really fabulous and eye-opening segment with you, as I knew it would be, because you can't just drop this out on somebody's lap, being the world, and just we don't have like a million questions with all of that. It's just fascinating. I am really looking forward to your journey. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to find next. Right. I'm looking forward to the documentary. When is that thing?
I have a book coming out too that I'm now into the 17th chapter of 22 chapters.
Wow. Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I'm writing about the experience. I'm writing about, day one. It's sort of autobiographical as well, because I think it's important that people understand that you just don't walk into, Brazil somewhere and suddenly discover a template cave. That just doesn't,
that doesn't happen. No.
It's like what preceded it, what happened in my life that made these changes happen so that my path took this, that my life took this path. Mm-hmm. And that's what the book is about. And I'm also go into, some of my speculation about the Templar families as well, about the generational research that I'm doing now, that I'm actively doing now.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I told myself I wasn't going to write any books until I was 80 because I'm a boots on the ground type of person. You don't sit still well. No. And I really like to be traveling and doing the physical research. Like I said, boots on the ground. I really like to climb the mountains and do the digging and do all that, right? Mm-hmm. But COVID gave me the opportunity to sit down and get this book written. So now what's happening out of that is that with the research that I'm doing about the Templar genealogies, I think there's another book that's going to be coming out after that. At this point, I can be pretty sure that that's what's going to happen next.
Oh, it sounds like it's going to be fascinating.
Well, the timing is now, and we talked about timing. And like I said, when that nun in France, when she sent me up to, on this little excursion to go to St. Baume that night, I went there that day. I promised her. She made me promise. I mean, she said, promise me, madame, promise me, madame. And she's hugging me like I'm her long lost daughter. And she gives me this map to go there. And we literally went up there that day and couldn't find it. So we continued with our trip down to Nice, and we met with some friends down in Nice. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I drew this little cabin thing. And I said, we got to go back to St. Paul. And he said, well, we were going to do that. I said, no, we have to go back to St. Baume. And so we went back to St. Baume, and the timing was perfect. The timing was what it was supposed to be. And when I got there, we drove right straight to St. Baume. The following morning, we got up, went up the mountain. We're going up the mountain into St. Baume, and I literally have butterflies landing on me and birds coming into I literally felt like I was in an altered dimension.
Wow.
To the little grotto, which is where she lived for anywhere from 11 to 17 years, depending on who you talk to. Really felt like I was in an altered dimension, like I was not here on earth, like I was in two places. And I dropped my knees and I went into meditation and had an amazing spiritual experience at that point. So it was meant to happen at that specific point in time, not a week earlier. So given that, we talk about timing. Here we are now in a time that I believe that the earth is giving up its secrets in terms of archaeological discovery.
Yeah. Yes.
Our bodies are giving up their secrets, and we're coming to terms with all this family and generational stuff. As individuals, this is happening, right?
We're evolving.
This wonderful thing back in 1970. What was it? 75, I think it was. I turned on his radio show at 6:00 in the morning on Sunday morning, and he started off with, "Do you know why angels can fly? Because they take themselves lightly." Right?
Yeah.
We're giving up. Our bodies are giving up all this stuff, and our planet is literally giving up all this stuff. And one of the things that the ancient priestesses did in Egypt back, thousands and thousands of years ago, was continue to clear the energy, to keep the earth light, to keep our bodies light and healthy, right?
No, it's true. Yeah, that's true. I think it's all part of evolution.
Yes. I do too. I believe that, my personal belief of evolution is that we were once dual being and we were not physical. We were created at the same time that the whole cosmos and everything was created, and we evolved, and we were ethereal beings, and as we began to look outside of ourselves, we became more and more physical. We became more and more physical, and look at where we are now.
Oh, it's hindered us. Yes.
I mean, we have sunk about as far into matter as we can get at this point.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And so now I think, if you look at the yugas, now we're moving into the Dwarpa, we're moving out of the Kali Yuga into the Dwarpa. So we're coming back into ascension. And we're no longer devolving, we are evolving at this point. And I think towards a time of enlightenment, of a raising of consciousness, and we see tremendous amount of indication of this. You and I would not be having this conversation 20 years ago.
No.
Right?
No. Oh, absolutely not. No. Especially with this audience. So there's a lot of them out there. So this is be one of those family secret discussions.
Absolutely.
Yes. Shh, don't ever talk about that. That's the family secret.
My
Okay.
mother literally used to tell me when I was a child, because I had out of body experiences and things when I was little all the
Yes.
time. Go out and watch everybody and tell them what they were doing. I was supposed to be taking a nap, and I was telling everybody, "Oh, I watched you do this and that." And my mother literally told me, "Don't you ever
Yeah.
tell them about
Oh no, they'll lock you up. So, oh, but I am thrilled that you're coming back. Tell everybody how they can find you before we sign off. And, I
Well,
want people to write to you. And
yeah, Facebook at Kathleen Ann Ball. Kathleen Ann, it's Kathleen, KathleneAnne, Ball, Ball. Or you can find me on our website at TemplarsInBrazil.com. And you can pull up all the information. You can also get updates as to when the documentary is coming out. I also have a Facebook page that is the Templars in Brazil Facebook page, so you can look me up that way, and you can reach me, at my email address, which is kballadonai, which is an ancient Hebrew word, but it's KBALLADONAI @gmail.com. So
if you
any of
have any questions,
yeah,
that's who you talk to. And she will be back. She's coming back in April, and maybe again after that if we can entice her a little bit. But I'm really hoping that this COVID thing just goes away. And I hate to say COVID thing like it's nothing, but honestly, I can't talk about it anymore. So it's just, hindered so much of us or many of us. Look at me not using my proper English. But I'm really hoping that it lifts and that you can go on and continue with this journey, because I really believe that this needs to be told. It
yes,
needs to get out there.
yes.
You
And
know,
again, timing is everything. So,
yes,
to me, this COVID has been a blessing in a sense that it slowed me down long enough to write my book,
yes.
and also really put some thought into a plan of how I want to proceed and where I want to go
Hmm.
and what I want to reveal. And certain things have to be revealed at certain times. You just don't put it all out there, you know. So I think that the timing is absolutely going to be perfect. When the COVID lifts enough to where I can finally travel again, I know that wherever I go, it's going to be perfect timing whenever I arrive there for whatever I discover when I get there.
Mm-hmm. I
So
like it. I like it.
I have total trust in the universe. I mean, the universe has got my back, and I really have.
Clearly, and it has a lot in store for you also, because it just keeps throwing it all at your feet. So I think you just need to stay the course, and because we're all living through you right now. We're all just waiting for you to go out and get this done. So so thank you for joining us. It was such a pleasure. I will definitely be seeing you online, and I will follow you and stay connected. And I can't wait till the next segment. And have a really happy new year.
Yeah, you too. You
Thank
too.
you.
Really
Thank
looking forward to a great new year.
Fingers crossed.
Yay.
Yes. So thank you, Kathleen. Thank you. So have a good night, because I know you're a few hours behind me. So
Yeah.
I'm nearing midnight, pretty soon. So so thank you.
You're
Thank
quite
you.
welcome. And yeah, I intend to have a nice evening. You too.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Night night.
Good night.
Well, end of a great segment, and wow, end of a great year. So, as the year comes to a close, and boy, what a year it was, we've seen many changes and losses, for so many. Our resilience was tested due to COVID with all of these lockdown and limitations and so on. And despite this difficult time, the outer realm has grown and evolved during 2020. And it's thanks to all of you. And it continues to grow off the charts. So, Amelia and I would like to take the time, I guess through me right now, to thank all of you, to thank our listeners for your continued support. We'd like to thank all of our amazing guests who have helped make this show what it is. Huge thank you to our sponsor, Folgers Coffee, who partially sponsor our Thursday evening show. But most of all, we'd like to thank Joe Montaldo, owner of the United Public Radio Network, our producer and dear friend, for believing in us and giving us the opportunity to continuously move forward, supporting us, kicking us in the butt whenever needed. And basically, welcome to 2021. So, on behalf of myself, Amelia, Joe, and all of us here at the United Public Radio Network, Happy New Year. See you in 2021. Joe.